even with bands that are really good, there's still a learning curve that happens. I mean, our early shows as a band were terrible. I mean, I wouldn't say terrible in the sense of like, you know, you couldn't listen to us and we sounded like the worst band ever, but I just mean that when you compare where we're at today as a band live and how we play together now after 10 years, our first shows just, they don't hold a candle to it. And I think that, you know, we were lucky to have a few years of touring in relative obscurity where there wasn't this sort of immediate internet presence and this sort of immediate what's going on with this band kind of thing to let us develop and let us make mistakes and let us sort out all of the sort of ego things that sometimes tear bands apart and all of the other things that really are difficult to deal with, you know. And I think if you have that spotlight on you right away, like I always feel, I don't feel bad, but I wonder like how the guys in the Arctic Monkeys deal with it. I mean, they seem like a band that, you know, we're young guys, first record comes out and it's just immediately enormous, right? I mean, the biggest thing since everything, yeah. Well, I mean, it's just kind of like the amount of pressure and responsibility that's immediately put on a band at that point. It's got to be mind-numbing, you know. It's weird enough for us 10 years on, but to have it be one day you're just hanging out with your friends and there's maybe 10 people at your shows and the next minute, yeah, you're a stadium rock band. I mean, that's just the level of, my hat is off to them for being able to keep it as level and sane and to continue to make records. I would have thought they would have broken up and all had bad drug habits after the first record. I mean, seriously, I wouldn't understand any other way to cope with it, you know? Yeah, but yeah, exactly. But, you know, seriously, my hat is off to them for being able to kind of keep some level of control and maintenance, keep a lid on it, so to speak, because it just seemed way out of control as far as that goes. In a place where we only say goodbye, it sounds like a violent wind that our memories depend.
After 10 years as the band, how would you say you've changed musically?
You know, I don't know. I don't know if we've, I mean, I think we've all gotten better players. I think that we, you know, I really feel like we push our level of songcraft as far and as in different directions as we possibly can. I mean, I know we're not reinventing the wheel. I mean, we still write pop songs, so to speak, but, you know, we really like playing around with the structure of a pop song, like trying to keep it away from your verse, chorus, verse sort of, you know, typical arrangement. And, you know, yeah, exactly. I mean, there are tricks that you can lean on that are sort of tried and true things that work, you know, and I'm really happy that in those times in our sort of songwriting and when we're kind of woodshedding ideas, that when you're tempted to go for the easy choice, sometimes we deliberately steer away from it, you know, like, yeah, exactly. You know, I think at least it makes it interesting for us. Now, I don't know, there's sometimes when that can be a little bit more self-indulgent than it needs to be or something like that, or, you know, sometimes you want to, you know, give it to someone when they need to have it given to them, so you don't want to just always be the trickster, you know, like, you know, hey, why don't you just resolve on a tonic for once, you know, that's fine.
The songs it plays, like you playing off the beat and stuff, there's a lot of syncopation, which
yeah,
is not normal for a pop band. You different, like you said, all these different techniques. And
yeah, we all bring our sort of different sort of interests and influences, you know, certainly to the studio and to into the practice space. So I mean, we're definitely, like I said, we push our version of songcraft in ways that kind of keep things interesting for us, I think. And a lot of that is informed by the live show now, I think. Maybe in the past where we would just maybe record a record and then try and figure out how to play it. It's become very important to us over the last few records to be thinking about the end result of these songs. Like, how is this going to translate live? How is this going to sound in front of 5 people? And how's it going to sound in front of 50,000 people? You know, what's the line?
The Atlantic was born today, and I'll tell you how.
You know, and those kinds of considerations do come up a little bit. But yeah, I wouldn't say that our sound has shifted drastically since our first album to this album. If you take all of our albums in totality, I think that you can kind of hear us evolve sort of more amoebically. It kind of grows. Yeah, it just doesn't. But I mean, it's not like we were a pop punk band in the beginning and now we're doing like, you know, acid jazz, you know, drum and bass stuff. You know, there's nothing that radical as far as our. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
To make an album. Obviously, you went to #1 in America, but you've gone from independent now and you've signed to Atlantic, which is huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
And that's going to give such a more push and maybe a bigger audience in the UK.
Maybe, I don't know. This is our second record out on Atlantic, and I think that it's done just about as well as the last record's done. I don't know. I really feel like there is a lack of fashion kind of around our band that sort of keeps us from kind of cracking into that real big NME mojo, centerfold spread kind of thing. I mean,
is that how the tour with Neil Young came along? He's kind of similar in his personalities.
Maybe
Neil's making it the way Neil Young.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Neil tour came along just because we had become sort of ingratiated with him and his friend. I mean, the people that work for him and all of that through the years. We played a show in 2004 with Pearl Jam as part of this Vote for Change tour. We were on tour with Pearl Jam, and Neil Young came out to one of the shows and performed with Pearl Jam. But we met him then, kind of, had a good rapport. Then we got invited to play in 2006 his Bridge School Benefits concert, which is this big kind of acoustic thing that he does for. There's a special school in California called the Bridge School that caters especially to I guess severely disabled kids. Kids that have a lot of motor coordination and that kind of disability. And so he throws this benefit every year. And we got invited in 2006, and then we did well there and met him then. And then I think it's just kind of a friendly thing. Yeah, and he's got his ear to the ground as far as what's happening contemporarily. I mean, he's a big fan of music too. So that's how the invitation came down. I don't think it had much to do with the relative lack of fashion in our band, but I do think that he respects our sort of artistic integrity a little bit. So that's a good thing, I guess. I mean, I don't think he would take out just anybody.
Approach from Neil to go on tour with him was an instant yes, or did the band sit down and go?
Nothing is ever an instant yes. I mean, there's certainly some considerations. I mean, if he would have came to us and said, "I'd like to go on tour, and here's $5," you'd be like, you can't really do things like that. I mean, I think that immediately we were absolutely interested in it. Of course we were. And as we kind of, kind of thought about it, how it would work in our tour cycle and, all of the other things, it became a pretty quick instant yes. We'll say that. I mean, there's nothing very knee-jerk about what we do, but, it didn't take us long to kind of figure out that this would be something. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Yeah, exactly. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, so of course we're going to do it. Yeah.
Where do you see the band going? What's the next? What's next for the band? You've got the landscape, you've got the #1 album in America.
I don't know what's next. Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to try and, do what we've always done is just, keep touring, keep playing shows, and hopefully keep making records that people want to hear on some level. Maybe we'll crack the UK at some point, But, I'm okay with that. A lot of people are like, you guys are so much bigger in the States than you are in the UK, and is that weird for you to play for, so many thousands of people in the States and then come here and play relatively smaller shows?
To make it over.
Yeah, but on top of it, I'm okay with having being a sort of more underground cult status thing here. That's absolutely great with me.
Because the fans that come to see you really find you and you can appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the British press will come around. I've found that, a friend of mine who lives here is like, they either get you right at the beginning when you're brand new and they think that you're the best thing since sliced bread and you've just saved rock and roll, or they find you 20 years after the fact, when you've been a band for 15 years and they'll pretend that they've been there all along, and I really believe that. I think we're just in that weird, awkward phase right now where we haven't been around long enough for them to suddenly come back and be like, there's this band that's been putting out great records for 20 years that you've never heard about. That's the next phase of what might happen on the British press front. But if that doesn't happen either, I don't feel like there is nothing about what's happened in the UK that feels like somehow a failure compared to what we've done. You just don't compare anything in life, that way. It's just the fact that we can play for any amount of people this far from home is mind-blowing.